the same line, you can separate them by commas. So in this example, we have 3 variables of type int named x, y, and z. And so we're going to, and this is called declaring variables. We haven't assigned any data to the variables. We just said this is the variable that exists. And what will happen in the program is the program will create those 3 variables in memory, but there's no values for them yet. You can assign a variable a value by using an equal operator. And we're going to talk about this in more detail when we talk about operators. But this is pretty simple, and you should understand it. Assigning a variable to a value, you just use equals and then the actual literal constant of the type. So in this case, x is an integer, decimal, so we assign it 112, and then we have the semicolon. That's assigning a value. And closely related to assigning a value is initializing the variable. Initializing the variable is basically having an initial value for that variable. And it's important to initialize your variables because if they don't have any data, any values associated with them, it could cause problems in your program. So you want to get in the habit of initialization. And initialization can be done as part of the declaration. Doesn't have to be. Basically what happens is when you declare the variable and you say, hey, this is my variable name, this is my type of variable, you can then immediately have the equals operators and then the value of the variable followed by a semicolon. Like, for example, int x equals 21. In that case, you're declaring a variable named x of type int, and you're also assigning it a value of 21, initializing it a first value. And that's initialization. Another example, int y equals 32, z equals 14. We can do it on the same line, initialize 2 variables of the same type. Int xz equals 94 is okay to do by the compiler, but in this case, you're not actually initializing both variables. Only z will be initialized. X is not initialized. So z is going to be equal to 94. X is not going to have a value. So that's important. And we're going to be declaring and initialized variables all throughout our code. So let me just go and we'll bring up a simple project in code blocks and I can show you how you basically can declare these variables, just like these examples. So here we are in code blocks. This should look familiar from our previous example programs. We have some comments at the top from lines 1 through 6. They're multi-line comments. We have our include directive on line 8 saying we're going to use standard library. And then we have our entry point to the program, our main routine on line 10. And we're not doing anything in our program. Now, again, for a program to be interesting to do anything of substance, you're going to want to create and use variables. And there's all sorts of different ways. Right now, we don't really know all the data types, so we can't really create many different types of data. We've really just had that int example. But again, just to reiterate, all you need to do is you have to specify the data type. We know int, so you type in int. And actually, with the IntelliSense in this nice integrated development environment, it displays all the other things that you can define with int. It actually completes I. If you were to type an F, you would see maybe other things completed, like a float is another data type that we'll talk about. But again, to declare a variable, you just say the data type, a valid name. Remember, valid names start with alphanumeric characters or underscores. Can't start them with digits. So here I could just say int Jason. And then I have a semicolon to end the declaration. And that's how you declare a variable. Now, if I want to initialize that variable, which you should do, during the declaration, you just use the equals operator and you specify the right type of data. So int is a decimal, so I have to say a number. I can't put a word in here because I didn't specify a word. I specified a number, and that would give a compile error. But all you have to do is specify based on the type of data and then a semicolon. Remember, semicolons end the statements. And that's initializing and declaring a variable on the same line. You could also assign values to variables later in your program. So I could just declare it, and I could actually initialize it. Let's say it's equal to 5. And then I could overwrite it in another line. I could say Jason equals 8. I want to change the variable because variables can change values. Here we're assigning data using the equals operator, and you'll notice that there's no data type on line 14. All we have to do to access that variable is specify the name to modify it. We'll talk more about the equals operator when we talk about operators. But this is the basics for variables. They represent data in your program stored in memory, accessed via variables using these naming conventions, and initialized and declared in your program with data types and assigned values. Thank you.